bringing down our artifacts that have been in the barn loft for over 20 years. We had to clean them. If you like and you want to be part of the museum committee, cleaning the products as well as doing the research is an important part. So if that piques your interest, come and see me. So tonight, we turn it over to Lon and Trudy. And you're full of stories. The copies, a lot of the early ones had a column called Let's Chat. So let's chat. You're on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sure. Good. Once upon a time, isn't that how all fairy tales start? My mother was, well, first off, I think we should go back and tell a little family history. That is, my parents were responsible for this whole thing. My mother was a Lutheran school teacher. She lived in South Dakota, and she got a call to New London, Wisconsin. And my dad was a custodian of the church and school there. And their eyes met, just like in any movie. And they did a little bit of courting, I guess. And eventually, they got married in South Dakota. And then they came back to New London, Wisconsin, where they went back to work. And then after the appropriate amount of time, I arrived. And in fact, that was so important that I had a boat named after me sitting on the Wolf River in New London. And then after 2 years, my mom convinced my dad that he wanted to live in South Dakota on my grandfather's ranch. He'd never been in South Dakota except for a wedding. And he must have been in love or something, because they took off for South Dakota. And my grandpa had a few thousand acres and thousands of sheep and cattle. And my dad didn't know anything about it, but he stuck with it for a while. And then he went to a show in the Twin Cities, I believe it was, equipment for the ranch. And he met Art Friedland. Art Friedland owned the orchards back here, which now Sequest Orchards probably covers about the same area that Friedland Orchards did. And he offered my dad a house if he would be the resident manager. He'd never been in Door County, and I imagine he knew a cherry from an apple, but that's about all he knew about. So we left South Dakota, and we arrived in Elson Bay at the house, at Stone House, where Clay Bay Pottery is now, sometime in late December. And the orchard business didn't used to be an abandoned Lutheran church next to the old hillside. And he opened a restaurant in there. And the story is we slept in the balcony and they fried hamburgers downstairs. I don't remember, I was too young. And the bottom half of that church is our log house over here. And then the Viking Grill became available. And it had been built during the war, I believe, huh? 1940. Did somebody run it before my parents?
The daughters are supposed to have a big Clinky, who was Gus Clinky's wife, and she was Gilbert Whitman's sister. They ran it with the group, one summer, maybe 2 summers.
So anyway, my parents rented it for the season, and they were ecstatic. They made $1,200. And I think they started off with 5-cent hamburgers, kind of a real deal, you know, get people addicted or something. And then they increased it to 10 cents, and they said that 100% increase. I mean, there was almost rioting in the streets. Then my dad bought a house on the corner of Mink River Road in Lakeview for $500 and moved that to Elson Bay for the snack shack. I guess the Viking was your parents, the next one in there after my parents. And so he moved it over to where the antique shop is, which is where the old Orlando used to be. And that was a snack shack. I remember at the Viking, there's only one thing I remember about the Viking. I had baking soda can with a slit in it. And I was walking around in the restaurant getting donations for me or but I guess I collected it. And Trudy, have you looked at that now?
I don't know. Are you done?
No, your story starts next, right?
No. Are you done?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I have to come back and finish some more.
Lon is, I should tell you that the stool that Lon is sitting on was one of the many stools that we sat on when we folded papers on Wednesdays when we published the Golden Reminder. I have a story here from the 25th year of the Golden Reminder. This is the size of the Golden Reminder when I started working. It's a 14 by 17 sheet, folded in half, folded in half. And it was labor intensive, very labor intensive on those days. We had newsprint standing in the press room, probably this high. And each stack was one of these sheets. These pages had no numbers to them. They were just whatever advertiser was in the front page, they were on the first shelf. I actually was able to get to the innovative printing this morning and have copies made of the only two pictures we have of women folding. The reminder is on the top of the first edition. Wednesday was a big deal.
Black and
on
white at the top and
publication.
middle.
You had these sheets of paper just piled high, and you stuck in each one into one of the folding shelves, and you grabbed one at a time, and you banged it like this, and folded it like this, and threw it off to the side. So it was a big day because we had to get at least 12 to 14 people in to fold that thing, because we had to have it at the post office by 4:45 or 3:30 on Wednesday afternoon. And some days we didn't make it. We made most of it, but we had to end up trying to chase down the mail truck, however far south he went. So I'd like to share with you what was written 25 years ago about the door reminder.
I think that was written by Keith Stevens, wasn't it?
I don't know, I think Grace thought your mom wrote it.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
I think he did something for that. So anyway, this was March 22nd, 1972. I started as a door reminder February 19th of 1970, and I was there until September of 2010. That's when the door reminder opened. So this week, 7,500 Door County homes will receive the 25th anniversary edition of the 1,358 copy of the Door Reminder, a highly esteemed popular little paper which costs them nothing. Reading it, housewives will decide where to shop for groceries, where to take the family to dine, and how to vote on the pertinent issues of the day. Farmers will scan as columns for the best buys in livestock, feed, used cars, and snowmobiles. The fun-loving crowd will look for places to dine, dance, play cards, and goals. Let's Chat is as a part of column will discuss such controversial subjects as the merits of cherry pie, treating mother to a restaurant dinner, and supporting the Cub Scout movement. It is strictly a shopping guide, not a newspaper, but sharp-eyed readers can easily learn who is leaving town, going out of business, buying real estate, or redecorating their home simply by checking the for sale, rental, used car, and roaming sale numbers. The Door Reminder read, word for word and from cover to cover, is as much a part of Door County as its vaunted scenery. Quite an achievement for a paper born 25 years ago in a cardboard box and fathered by a next-door order cook from Ellison Bay named John Kapitsky. This was in 1947, and Kapitsky, owner of an insolvent seasonal restaurant aptly called the Snack Shack, was desperately searching for another occupation to fatten the family finances. Despite frail health, he found work loading lumber and promptly ruptured himself. While hospitalized in his hometown New London Hospital, a nurse routinely handed him the local shopping guide, and John's brainchild was conceived. A night rate phone, I think this is supposed to be a late night phone call to his wife Frances, home with their two children, encouraged him to stop off at Green Bay and invest his last $55 in a hand-cranked mimeograph machine, a box of stencils, one stylus, 2 reams of paper, and a bottle of ink. The entire purchase consumed a half-hour's time, and the new print shop easily fitted into a cardboard carton, which Kapitsky held on his lap the rest of the bus trip home. The Door Reminder was about to be born, but about 3 weeks passed before the fledgling left its nest. Francis, the former teacher, typed copy on a borrowed typewriter, drew headlines with a stylus, and decided to charge 35 cents for a classified ad in case anybody wanted one. Their first one-sheet paper devoted a half-page ad ad on the back to Eat at the Snack Shack, as John presently decided to continue frying hamburgers until the 35 sentences started to roll in. The first 600 copies, which cost $6 to mail, were sent to Ellison Bay, Sister Bay, and Bailey's Harbor. The next day, Kavitsky set forth on foot to sell advertising to the grateful recipients. Proof of his salesmanship was evidenced in the following week's paper. There were 4 pages, and surprising as it may seem, that copy bears many earmarks of the present door reminder. Let's Chat was left on the left-hand column of the front page. The building bulletin from Razor Lumber Company, Lambert Yards Today, was up at the right-hand corner of the front page. There were ads for Rogers Electric, Columbus Store, Paul's Glass Bar, Youngwood Hardware, Benson Furniture, White Carlson's Food Market, Door County Cleaners, Sister Bay Feed Mill, Nelson Store, John Paul Hardware, Cherry Lynn Restaurant, Alwaysbees, and Hendrickson's Garage. Like Foxy, the door reminder grew and grew. Advertising conscious businessmen assured its success from the start, and after 3 months there were requests from people in Hebron, Fish Creek, and Egg Harbor. Why don't we get a door reminder? Thus it was that in the summer of 1947, the circulation was doubled. Naturally, the volume too was doubled. By fall, John was printing 1,000 mimeograph pages by hand. Then, too, the snack shack was still in operation, so the printing was being done in the back room. However, by this time, the door reminder was no longer just a sideline. The Kavitsky said a dry goodbye to the snack shack. They were then full-time printers. By October 1947, the hand crank machine was replaced by an electric mimeograph machine, which could print 4,000 copies in 1 hour. The circulation was then increased to 4,000, including every home north of Sturgeon Bay. Then job printing consumed an ever-increasing amount of time, and the need for better printed copy arose. Thus, in October 1949, the mimeograph machine was replaced by an offset press. It was a big step and a costly one, and Kavitsky still wondered how they survived through the period of learning the new process by trial and error. At one time, they sent an SOS call to a Milwaukee supplier and begged for assistance in solving some of the crushing problems that had arisen. A young man came one Sunday evening as the bus, and the 3 of them went to work after supper. They forgot about sleep that night, the next day and the following night. They set up a dark room and made improvisations for several pieces of equipment that they could not afford to buy. For instance, an old phonograph was used for whirling the aluminum plates while they were being sensitized. A car meter fanned heat on the plate as it went around on the record disc. An old studio camera was converted into a darkroom camera. Among the first print jobs were picker tickets for a cherry grower. Francis, loath to lose an order for one of the proper equipment, perforated the cards on her sewing machine.
Oh dear.
Thousands of bus tickets were late and baby bus lines were perforated by the sewing machine also. The orders were delivered on time, but the machine never worked properly again. The next innovation for perforating was the gear of an alarm clock in which was welded a handle and the wheel was run across the paper. Today, a modern electric perforating machine is used. Until 1952, the office of the door reminder and even the first offset press occupied a greater part of the Kavitsky living quarters. They lived behind it, above it, and with it. As the business grew, it needed new quarters and a new shop was built. Open house was held on March 8, 1953, and a large offset press was purchased at that time. Then the door reminder took on a new appearance, a tabloid as it is today. In 1957, they added a stock room, which is now the press room, and since then another room has been added for stock. In the layout department, the door reminder has advanced from a barrel typewriter to 3 typers. The newer models having succeeded the first. New equipment has been added as the year grows. Circulation has soared to 7,500, nearly 10,000 in the summertime, all in Door County, and the original one page now a fat 25 to 50 page tablet. In 1965, the Sturgeon Bay shop was added in order to better accommodate the advertisers and readers in the southern part of the county. 7 delivery boys bring a copy of the weekly shopping guide to every home in Sturgeon Bay on Thursdays. All the other copies are mailed by permit number 1 in Allison Bay on Wednesday afternoon, and they go to every home in their county, from Washington Island to Forestville, Maplewood, and Brussels. Instead of the original 1 cent piece for postage, the door reminder is now costing 5 cents to mail. As the paper grew in size and the job training increased, so the workforce also grew from the original husband and wife team to 9 steady employees, plus several part-time helpers who work on publication day only. The senior employee is Delmar Olson, who has worked as pressman, photographer, and plate maker for the Bisbees for 22 years. Their son Lon has worked in both shops and on the road selling printing and advertising for over 12 years, and his wife Ruth Ann joined the force in 1964, doing bookkeeping and layout work. Tom Wilson became the door reminder upon his discharge from the Navy in 1966, and he works in both shops. Dorothy Peterson has worked in the layout department for 14 years, and Trudy Fondry in the same department for the past 2 years. Beth Blazer works in the Sturgeon Bay office and sells advertising in Sturgeon Bay and Southern Door County. So here's the poem which John originated for the first edition. It's obviously his favorite and with good reason. I could just see him doing this. The codfish lays 1,000,000 eggs. The barnyard hen but one. The codfish doesn't cackle to show what she has done. We scorn the modest codfish, the cackling head we prize, showing that beyond a doubt, it pays to advertise.
Great.
I've seen publishing or printing. I was a typesetter. I've seen it go from this archaic backwoods typing to the offset or the comic. We went from the Veritypers, and then we went to ComSets, which were computerized, and then we went to the desktop publishing in the time I was there. All the big type that you see on that page on the bottom, the bigger type, that was all done on a headliner, which was something that you had to put it into a machine. I did not work on this one, believe it or not. This one was there before me. The one I used. But this went into a machine. And you stuck it in. And there was a little opening where you picked your letter. And you stopped because it hooked in a little peg hooked into this slot here. And then you hit a switch. And a light came on and photographed this letter onto a piece of film. So if you had to say for sale,
One letter at a time.
you had to do it. You had to spin it forward, the open arm, and a space, and you kept hitting the switch. And then in the back of the machine was a little box that had your fixer, your developer, your fixer, and water. There was a little tray that slid in the back of the unit. And it ran it out and it printed it. It came out. This was our waxer. Our waxer was used to put adhesive on the back of our paper when we were typing. I'm surprised we never burned the place down with this thing. This thing got really hot. You put a beeswax in here. And when it got to a certain type, you just ran it through, and it put a piece of wax on the back of the paper. And it was the same with the Verityper. The Verityper this was a machine that if you wanted to do what you call justify a copy for catalog or whatever, you had to feed your paper. You put your paper in this little piece of wood, and you shut it, and you clipped it shut, and then you stuck it back in here. And to justify something, you have to type it twice, because you set margins in here. So you have to make sure you typed it exactly the same way the first time, or it wouldn't justify. So you had to do it all over. So the rulers had to be, you had to be careful, because when you got towards the end of the sheet, it would shift, and then your copy was corrected. So this was, and you only had two choices of type, because you had these little discs in here that come out, and this was your typeface. So some were bold, and some were serif. We thought this was a big deal. When we went to the CompuGraphics, it was even a bigger deal. There you had a disc that had four instances of type on it. But of course, along with the computer comes problems. So we could be working Tuesday night trying to get this page done, and the offset would say, no, not tonight. And we'd have to get a repairman come from Green Bay to fix it, so we could keep working. Then we had to pick the hidden name. Anybody remember the hidden name? Hidden door name. We had to keep track of the hidden name and whose ad we put it in, because I think we gave them credit on the bill, didn't we? They had to show us proof that the person had come in and claimed their $5, and then I think we took the $5 off their bill.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But the one thing we were family. We were family. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We saw good times and we saw bad times and hard times. So,
Good job, Trudy.
Yep, yep.
any questions? Or you can talk some more?
Oh man, you have to, that was in 1972, we have to update it a little bit today. Thanks for
What's your name?
let's see. Well, Ruth Ann, my dear wife, and six of her friends from Antwerp came up here on vacation in early '60s, and I was with a couple of friends, and the same old story. Across the front of the room, our eyes met. And then it happened. We saw each other for about 6 years off and on. There were a lot of stops and starts. Took a while to get rolling here. And then in 1964, we got married in Belders, her hometown. She had been working in Manitowoc. And we rented a house in Ellison Bay, the Charlie Anderson house, for $25 a month. And even then, it was a bargain. And of course, my parents, they seemed to like their new daughter-in-law, and they hired her right on the spot. And she was the bookkeeper. And she brought with her a new system that she had been using for bookkeeping in the office in Manitowoc. And she usually, well, at that time we had a St. Bernard and a Chihuahua. And they both had the same markings, they were brown and white. And she usually took the Chihuahua to the office, easier to carry than the Saint Bernard. And so, one day, she left the Chihuahua and the Saint Bernard was in the office, and the little old lady came in and said, "Oh, your puppy finally grew up." And Ruth Ann was also a pioneer in the early space program, a little known fact. And she was working in the office in this foundry in Manitowoc, and a chunk of something fell out of the heavens and landed right on 8th Avenue in Manitowoc. And they called her office and wanted her to come over and pick it up and take it back to their lab and have it analyzed. And so she did. And they had no idea what it was. And so then you took it to another foundry and lab, I guess.
We have an aluminum foundry and we took it to the iron foundry, neither one could identify the metal in it.
And so later, it was determined that it was part of Sputnik.
Whoa.
Sputnik had burned up and chunk of it fell right down Manitowoc. And I think it's in the Rara Museum in Manitowoc at right this moment.
It burned a hole in the road on North 8th Street in Manitowoc. Somebody saw it ran. By the time they got to pick it up, it had melted into the blacktop. They had to freak it out of the blacktop.
Oh,
And I handled it.
Part of the space program.
Meanwhile, back at the reminder, our circulation, is this still on?
Doesn't sound like it.
Or can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's on a sound change.
Is it a switch?
Our circulation had reached 17,000, including the vacation time. And we sent 13,000 reminders through the mail each week, and 4,000 we distributed around the county at pickup spots for the tours. And we had two presses that printed the reminder then, a 14 by 17 sheet this size. And one was a sheet fed press. It would pick up each sheet, and the other one had a roll converter. It would cut off the 14 by 17 sheet off these 500-pound rolls and send that through. And I remember sitting in that press room like till 2 in the morning running both presses. We just couldn't keep up anymore. It was impossible, virtually impossible. We stored these rolls in the brew downtown, and then just rolled them next door as we needed them. And our postage, at that time, we were considered third-class mail, and so we paid through the nose. Compared, the third-class mail is what you call junk mail and everything, but second class is newspapers, magazines, paid subscription, and that was just a fraction of what we paid. I think we paid like $125,000 in postage per year. We were the largest customer of the Postal Service in Door and Kewaunee counties. And I like Trudy was saying, the mail left Elson Bay at 4:45, and during the summer, we got a few reminders there by time, but the bulk of them, we played all kinds of games. We followed the mail truck out of Elson Bay and caught up with it in Sister Bay or Fish Creek or Bailey's Harbor, whatever it took. And the Fish Creek Post Office postmaster said that isn't legal, you can't do that. So I called his superior in Green Bay, and he said, oh yes, you can do that, they're our best customer. So, in 1975, Ruth Ann and I bought the reminder from my parents. They had retired and they had a home in Florida. And we had one little situation though. Well, besides not having any money, but we could overcome that. We owned the Mink River Fishing Camp for about 6 years. And both of us worked there part-time at that, mornings, weekends, whatever. And it was a lot of fun. We never made any money, but we sure had a lot of fun. And so my dad said that you can't buy this business with that goofy fishing camp. And Ruth Ann said, he's right. She was very emphatic, you will sell that. So much to my chagrin, we sold it. We sold it to a group of 103 owners, and they came with 2 attaché cases of $20 bills. They have a bunch of pizza joints. But fishing camp stories, man, that would be a book in itself.
Out of Chicago.
I'll just, some of the highlights here. The porcupines, we were overran by porcupines. They would chew on the boats, the oars. One night, during the summer, we stayed in the log cabin down Mink River and then rented out our house in Elson Bay. And one night we were sleeping and we heard something gnawing on the wall. And there was a little washroom where the water heater was, and right next to our bed in the bedroom there. And the darn porcupine was chewing through the Celotex. I couldn't find a flashlight, so I started throwing shoes and growling. And I think, well, you didn't get all the way through, but you got pretty darn close. One morning, we left the fishing camp to go to work, and it's about a mile-long road through the woods, a narrow gravel road, just a trail, actually. And we couldn't get out. The beavers during the night had dropped several trees on the road. So I had to get the chainsaw up to cut up trees before we could get back to work. And another thing is, we both have a vivid memory of a guy standing on that dock. We had a bad dock. It was a low budget dock, used lumber and everything else. And he was standing there with a styrofoam box of minnows, short, chubby guy, and he fell right through the dock. The minnows hit the dock, and he said he was a lawyer. And he said he was probably going to sue us. And we never heard anymore, thank goodness. And, one day Ruth and I were out on Mink River in a boat, and, Heidi, our Saint Bernard, we left her on shore. We were downriver about 2 blocks. And, we turned around, here came Heidi swimming down the river. We turned around, headed back real quick. By the time we got there, just her nose was sticking out of the water. And, did you ever try to lift 130 pounds St. Bernard into a pool? The reminder, we had to count them out in bunches of 50 and tie them up and throw them in mail bags. And that the ladies that gathered every week to collate cold reminders, that was a social event of the year. I mean, the ladies would actually dress up and they talked about, I don't know what the ladies talk about, love, marriage, babies, I don't know, recipes too, yeah. And it was pretty entertaining. It got to the point where we just couldn't keep up with the volume, so we farmed out the printing of the reminder to Brown County Publishing in Denmark, Wisconsin, that is. We had a big truck, and we would go down there with the negatives. Everything has to go to negative before it can be printed. The negative burns the image into aluminum plate. And then we'd haul them back to Sunshine House in Sturgeon Bay, where they'd be inserted with flyers and put back in the mail bags and mailed at the Sturgeon Bay Post Office. And later, we did the same thing in Fond du Lac, where they handled our printing, and then finally Shawano. And in 1986, we built a 6,200 square foot building in Sister Bay at the Country Walk Shops, And it took almost 2 years to build because of shoddy workmanship. It was awful. And some of you guys remember Mike Dill, possibly. We got him involved, and he pointed out to everybody what they were doing wrong. And so that was a headache. This new building, we expanded our commercial printing department. We bought new equipment, and we bought a Heidelberg press. It's the Cadillac of printing presses. I guess probably it was just a vanity thing for me. I always wanted one, but when you spend $450,000 on a press, you better keep it busy. And we did keep it busy, but not quite busy enough. There were 17 employees then, and the business expanded when we moved, but so did the overhead. It took a couple of years before we really felt the pinch, but we were soon COD, and we were behind at the bank, and things looked pretty grim. And one day the banker called. I didn't like the guy anyhow. Not because he was a banker, but I just didn't like him personally. And I liked him less after he called. he said, Kopitsky, you may as well declare bankruptcy, there's no way you're gonna survive. And, oh man, I went ballistic. I went right over to that bank. I'm not clear what I had in mind, but for starters, I was gonna knock everything off his desk, maybe tip it over, I don't know. But fortunately, he wasn't there, so. So, we tightened our belts and we got lean and mean. Trudy, did you know how bad things were?
Yeah.
You got paid though.
Yeah.
Yeah. We hired a guy from Chicago area. He and his family had a publication down there, and he came to Door County to retire. And he helped us a lot. And he had some new ideas, some new things we could try, and he made dang sure that our advertising rate was up where it should be. And slowly we crawled out of the hole. And the largest reminder published ever was the Progress edition, 96 pages. So that would be 24 sheets folded in quarters. Well, now, after we went to having the printing farmed out to these other places, the sheet was double the size, almost double the size of the one that we printed. And while the banker was explaining to me how tough things were, I took it to heart, and I told Ruth Ann, I'm gonna go home, I don't feel right. So I got home and I said, I can't stand this anymore. I was tingling from my head to my toes. And so she called 911 and they came and got me and off to Sturgeon Bay, and they didn't even stop there. They went on. They said, this guy's having a heart attack. And they got to Green Bay and they did all the tests, couldn't find a thing. So they said, go home and relax. Yeah, right. Some of the funny things that happened, we had a little old lady from Bailey's Harbor that advertised varnished drawers. And Sonia, that worked at the Reminder, said she irons her drawers, but she doesn't varnish them. And anyway, Sonia would just roll in the aisles when we talked about varnish. And then we had an outfit that was advertising for dead and disabled cattle. And I guess we put the ad right next to a restaurant ad. And that was one of the things that wound up on the, I don't know if it was David Letterman or Johnny Carson show. They would feature some misprints or funny things that way. And then Cordis's English Inn. It was owned by Cordis, and there was help on it, and the ad came in over the phone, and somehow it was transposed, and among the different waiters and busboys and so forth, courtesans. They were advertising for courtesans. I don't know how that happened, but they found it amusing and so did a lot of other people. There was a guy that lived in Fish Creek. He was from Detroit, and his dad was chairman of the American Communist Party. And Nars Pasterchek was his name. And he would, were you there when he was? He would give us his handwritten copy. I mean, he had a beautiful handwriting. And we paid him, or he paid us to publish it, or print it. And it was so bizarre. I mean, he claimed that God was speaking to him. God was paying the advertising bill, I think, or something like that.
He would never leave. He would just never leave.
No.
Until, we made Ruth Ann call on and say, just make a remark, and then pretty soon I would have to hang up or discontinue the conversation and finally get the guy out of the office.
And Nars had a dog that died, and God told him that Rover was probably going to rise, so it should just leave him. Last time I checked with Nars, Rover hadn't risen yet. I guess flies were gathering, so that didn't work out either. And then we got a crank letter from somebody that said by the last day of December, all the editors in Wisconsin were going to be dead. And I have no idea what that was all about. But we gave it to the sheriff, and we never heard any more about it. I knew I didn't want to be dead. Oh yeah, then Lee Peterson and I were delivering door reminders in Sturgeon Bay. Well, my dad would come up to the Elson Bay Schoolhouse on Thursdays and load up the car with as many kids as you could fit in there. He'd drive down to Sturgeon Bay and we'd deliver them door to door. And Lee Peterson and I, he was probably 12 years old, I was probably 8, I guess. On Pennsylvania Avenue, I still remember it. We were supposed to take the street down to the end. And got there, it was midwinter and it was dark. And my dad never showed up. Never showed up. So Lee, being kind of a spiritual guy, he said, maybe we should pray. So Lee led us in prayer, and by golly, it worked. And then there was a lady from Ephraim who didn't want the door reminder. And it would take an act of Congress to stop it, because it's free circulating to every box holder, and we had no way of stopping it. So we tried, but every Thursday she would come into the office and lay that paper down on the floor. And I think she was some kind of environmentalist. She figured she was saving a part of a tree maybe, or wanted to, or I don't know. But that went on for quite a while. And then the ice contest, that sign there, that was quite a experience too. The latest ice ever went out, I think, was May 3rd. Yeah, that was back in the 40s. And It started out, well, originally Burns Brothers Lumber Company, which is on the south end of the beach in Sister Bay where the condos are now. They started the contest, but they dropped it, so we picked it up again. And we started out kind of low budget. We just nailed 3 pallets together with a sign on and put it out there. And we had a timing device, kind of basic timing device. In L. Johnson's boathouse, we had an alarm clock and a string tied to that. When the ice went out, would pull the cord up. And there also was a rope so that it couldn't go out too far. I mean, sometimes the rope broke. I remember going there one morning and the alarm clock had been unplugged and the rope broke and it pulled the alarm clock right through the wall. There were pieces so I just picked the number out of the air. And then in 2003, suddenly out of the blue, Gannett Corporation approached us and said they wanted to buy us. And we haven't even considered selling, but we were of age for retirement, or close to it anyhow. And they said we had 2 weeks to decide. So we finally made the decision and they bought it. Gannett is a huge corporation. They own most papers in Wisconsin.
Right.
And I don't know how many states. They do billions of dollars worth of business, but they could not manage the door reminder. I mean, after 7 years, they closed it down. We had customers that would pay us 2 or 3 times a year. You know, everybody is seasonal up here. Some would probably pay us midsummer and then late fall, maybe a time in between. And we would just carry them. They paid interest, of course. But Gannett had 30-day credit. That was it. And so they lost all kinds of business. So they just closed down the reminder, and that was it. And so the last reminder was the last reminder was, oh, here it is. The last reminder was September 7th, 2010. And here it is. Just a fraction of the size that it used to be. So that's about it. For something else here?
Questions? Does anybody have any questions?
I think we have some Jones on.
Oh,
Anybody ever heard of North Bly?
yeah.
Yeah.
Nord Bly is a renowned writer, and he and I published this book, and it's a compilation of some of his writings and some of my answers. And I guess I'll just read these couple pages here. Dear Norb, this was me writing to him. Dear Norb, the pen is mightier than the sword. I'm convinced, and would you believe that when originally written, they hadn't even met your pen yet? That pen of yours is so mighty that you should be required to carry a license for a concealed weapon. With pen in hand, you should be considered armed and dangerous. Nor this past week has been less than thrilling. The natives are restless. It looks like D-Day is coming. There could be a shootout at OK Corral. Armageddon is near. Nord, you are one controversial scribe. There's nothing wrong in being controversial. You have some elite company. Abe Lincoln, Jesus Christ, Ernest Hemingway, Frank Lloyd Wright, all were controversial. I know that controversy doesn't bother you, but now the problem is I've become controversial too through association with your Bly at Large column in the Reminder. Frankly, it boils down to economics. The advertisers pay the bills at the Reminder, and some are presently ticked off. I can't afford that. I think we did something unique. I don't know if the writer of your caliber with your credentials has ever written in a shop or free paper like the Reminder before this. I was pleased and felt quite privileged. Last October, when we reached a mutual agreement on the terms for the column, everything was spelled out precisely. It was agreed that I would pay you so much a week and you would write on any subject you wanted, unedited, uncensored, and unbridled by me. Initially, everything went fine. The majority of people enjoyed your writing, although you may have hammered the blue boxes a bit long. Letters, phone calls, comments on the street, all were running overwhelmingly in your favor. Then came Love to Do More X. That was his fictitious secretary. Love to Do More X. That caused concern among quite a few people. Some people found it offensive and were discussing a possible printing advertising boycott against the Reminder. But the culmination was last week's article, Shut the Damn Door. Some of the business community were shook and threatened to quit doing business with the Reminder. They said it promoted an anti-tourist attitude that would be turn off for our guests from outside the county. Then there were some who read the article literally and were wondering how you could suggest such absurd, borderline insane programs. Norb, it was tough trying to explain that your article shouldn't be taken so literal. Maybe you should have prefaced your piece with a statement that you were being extreme in order to make people think it would be a sort of counterbalance to Kendig plan being formulated for Door County. Norb, you have to admit that I was ill at ease with some of your columns. I didn't know what to do. I was worried about repercussions. I decided to run them. We had a contract and I hoped for the best. Why does your support or opposition have to be so white or black? Why can't we have more gray? Nor if they love you or hate you, what surprises me is how your support or opposition comes from all corners. There were developers and resort owners who really enjoyed last week's article and were not angered by it. Love to Do More X disturbed some clergymen and yet amused others. Some women found love to be chauvinistic, most didn't though. Nor I found most people who were mad at you and me and suggested a possible boycott were quite gracious, apologetic in some cases. What did disturb me was when some people questioned our Christianity. I know I'm a Christian, I'm not about to speak on your behalf. What to do? I know, let's decide in a democratic way. Let's vote. I know this goes against your grain. To quote you, Bly at Large is not going to be voted in or out of any office on any other terms and to be allowed his freedom of the press. Bear with me, Norm. I know what I'm doing, I hope. And so then I Oh, sound off, be heard, send, deposit this ballot, simply deposit this ballot in the box at the door reminders, Sturgeon Bay or Sister Bay. And, here was the ballot that we ran in the reminder. And we got a few hundred, and of course I had the ballot box, and I'm not telling. And so then, what got us started is, this, Norb's, article would usually appear like this, and we had a blank page there in the reminder, and then I explained why we did. So, that was a lot of fun.
Lonnie, you outlived Norm too, didn't you?
I outlived him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyone have questions for Trudy or Lon?
So Lonnie, I do, so the door reminder was downtown for how long? In Allison Bay?
Let's see, we moved in, 86 to Sturgeon Bay. Our sister Bay, I mean.
40 years.
4?
40 years.
40.
I would just like to say one thing. Thank you, Lon and Trudy, for doing this. I'm Lon's kid sister, younger by a lot, I might add. Folding day on Wednesday was the best time ever for a kid. Because you go in there, and my twin brother and I, our jobs were to gather up the folded papers and count them into stacks of 50 and get them ready to tie off. And that meant we had to go around all these ladies. I learned so much. You cannot imagine. Thank you.
It was real teamwork.
There were 5 kids in the Kopitsky litter. Grace and her brother were twins, and there's 15 years difference between us. She's the youngest, I'm the oldest.
Oh, really?
Grace, let me remind you, in ancient China, they considered the elders to be wise and revered. They were on a pedestal.
Okay, I'm gonna get on that.
You just didn't wanna be at the door reminder on April Fool's Day because we were always pulling something on somebody. One of the pressmen was afraid of birds. So I brought my husband's owl decoy in and set it back by his workstation. Ruth Ann was home with David, I think, who was just a baby, and Lon, Ruth Ann wants you at home. He walks in the house. You didn't call me, did you? So we spent time on, we go out on the boat at noon for lunch. Did that type of stuff. We went on salmon boat, charter fishing one night. Just did all kinds of stuff together.
Several skiing trips
Yeah.
in Upper Michigan.
Well, we went to the park, to Newport Park early one morning and had breakfast down on the beach. I think
Oh,
it
yeah.
was in February. It was pancake breakfast down there. So I mean, that type of stuff. Ruth Ann and I skied. I can still look back and see her skis going backwards down the hill that we were trying to get on.
I remember a story from your dad. He was pushing for ads, and he walked into Rudy's grill, and Rudy did all his own maintenance. So he was in the midst of putting down the grout for the pile. Your dad was so engrossed that seeing Rudy, he didn't see the work on the walk. Right.
He's still got an ad on him.
Right, so when he got up and, you know, got his bakeries, his big oven ready, but he also did all the plumbing and the, you know, flooring and whatever, so he was in the midst of a project, and your dad was doing his job.
So you worked there?
So my mom did, but
I think there's a couple of folders in the audience. You wanna raise your hand? If you had good arms and could sit long, you were, you know, you were called to fold.
Did you get paid by the ones you folded?
No, you got paid by the hour.
That was a good deal.
I thought it was just a flat $5 when I was doing
Now your hands got awfully dirty, because your hands got full of.
This was where you overpaid or underpaid?
I would say under.
Oh, okay.
What era, I mean, what years they were estimate?
I think probably 72-ish, I think, 71, 72, somewhere in there.
Well, that's good, so you said you didn't fold,
Yeah,
you folded.
John taught me all the first day I was there. He said it's free. Bing, 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 it's free, and put it on the pile.
So before you leave, you might wanna peek at the top two pictures in, of the first folders, and that was your early years. And to compare the print on the two versions, any of us that are teachers remember the Mimeo machine and everything, but to see you putting on a newspaper for,
Yeah.
I mean, we did like the neighborhood one or the third grade edition, and
Well,
that
I
was big
think
business.
I think the best typist was Frances, because she did not know how to type. She
Finger.
could do it. She was pretty fast on
Who
that.
did your proofreading?
But there were always typos.
well, that was to make sure people were reading.
Right? I was a teacher, that's what I always said, you get an extra point, you got it. Okay, are there any other questions? Otherwise, you're oh, we've got.
Your Honor, quick question, the Door County Pulse we have nowadays, did they get the idea from your paper, Lon?
I have no idea really.
Where that came from? Because it sounds like the papers are very similar. I mean, you know, free paper that people could get, and you know, it's got advertisement in it, it talks about all the stories in the county.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, no news at all, oh, okay.
Yeah, Pulse is the second rate paper. No. Second class paper,
Editorial.
Pulse is second class, whereas we were third class. We paid the postage rate 5 times as much as second class.
So you were all advertisement and no articles about the Door County?
Oh,
Very little,
commentary.
minimal.
Very good. A little commentary.
And the one thing the Door Reminder always did, the churches always paid, their rate was always half price, or a lower rate. And if ever there was a benefit or anything, it was always published for nothing.
That's why you were so important to the community, you know, in so many different ways, so, you know, like you said, Trudy, it was like family, and, played a very important role in building the community.
Les Chapman was in the first reminder. The first reminder, both sides of it are hanging in the middle of the board there. And that continued right up to the bitter end. And,
Right.
There was a little bit of humor once in a while. I think the second edition, my dad put a joke in there, of it though. His uncle, had 2 windmills, but there wasn't enough wind for 2, so he had to take one down.
Oh, and he started with your poem, his poem.
to look at the pictures and take your $5 chance on the beautiful Northern Lights Aurora quilt. And the Liberty Grove Historical Society sales table has the book that you made happen. And thank you all for coming. Oh, and there's food if you want to grab